welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be talking about design principles and how to use them. So what are design principles? Before we can really cover them, we need to talk about subjective versus objective design. Subjective design basically comprises the things that differ from person to person. For example, if you like a dark theme and I like a light theme, then that's subjective. But let's say that the theme didn't have great alignment, or it didn't have great white space, or it broke any of the design principles here. If it broke any of these design principles, then it will be objectively bad. So that's the difference. Like, I could make a website right now, and the website could be in a dark theme or a light theme, and it can still look trash if we break one of these principles. So let's get started with one of these. Alright, so the first principle I'm gonna cover with you is white space. So if we actually go here and do white space, right, so if I open up this file, as you can see, we have some classes and stuff. Don't worry too much about the classes. These are automatically generated. Let's not really focus on that for now. We want to make sure that we understand good design properly. Anything else that detracts from it, like CSS, I've gotten rid of that just to not waste too much time. So if I do open with live server here, and actually start the app and take a look at it, as you can see, there's no padding, there's no white space. This looks absolutely terrible. Why does it look absolutely terrible? Well, because there isn't really enough white space. Alright, so how can we fix that? Well, the first thing we need to do is basically prevent these boxes from stretching all the way from one side of the screen to the other, because this doesn't look good. You don't want stuff to stick to the edges of the screen, because that won't look very great. Alright, so if we go to our code here, to fix that first problem, we need to go to our div here and actually just do W45. I'm using Tailwind for the CSS here, but that's not too important. So if we actually save this piece of CSS and take a look at it, as you can see now it sticks to only one side. So we can fix that by centering it. How do we center it? Well, we're going to use margin 0 auto. So basically MX auto, this is the same as margin 0 auto. So if we save that and take a look at it, as you can see, now it's centered. But there are still a few other problems. It's sticking to the top, and the cards are sticking to each other way too much. So how can we fix those? Well, it's pretty simple to fix those. If we go to our code here, the first thing that we want to do is to prevent this container here from sticking to the top of the screen. For that, we're going to do MT4, so margin top 4. So if we save that and take a look at it, as you can see, it doesn't stick to the top anymore, so it looks a bit better. Alright, let's go back to our code. Here we have these cards that are sticking to each other way too much. So what can we do about this? Well, we can basically add margin to the left and right to them. So we're going to do MX2 on this card, and I'm going to find the other two cards and do the same thing. MX2. Right, MX2. Alright, so if I save this here, and hopefully if I did it properly, and actually take a look at it, as you can see, there's a bit of space between each card, so we're doing the thing that we want to do, right? But the problem here is that the space between the text and the card itself, there's just not enough space there. So let's fix that up. To fix that, we need to add some padding to every card. Alright, so if we go to our cards here and actually add some padding, so we're gonna add like a padding of 2 seems nice, so P2, P2. Right, let's give the other classes here P2. Alright, so MX-2 P-2. Alright, so let me find the last card here. Alright, let's give this one a P2. Alright, P-2. Alright, so if we save this, take a look at it, as you can see, the cards are spaced now and they look much better than the unspaced version. So that's the white space principle. It basically prevents you from sticking your cards out to each other and having them look absolutely horrible. There are a few other things you can do to basically solidify the principle some more. If we take a look here, as you can see, it says first card and then this randomly generated text. I think these stick to each other a little too much, so we're gonna fix that. It's usually better to add more spacing than to add less, but always just use your eye and see what looks better. Alright, so here we're gonna do class equals MT2. Alright, we're gonna give each of these a class of MT2. Alright, let me find the other div tags. Class equal MT2. Right, last one here. Alright, so class equals MT2. Alright, so if we actually save this and take a look at it now, as you can see, there's a little bit more space between the heading and then the rest of the text. So your example here looks excellent and it works perfectly. Notice that there is a subjective element and then there's an objective element. The subjective element here is that maybe the space between the lines of the text isn't good enough, or maybe we don't have enough padding, or maybe we don't have enough margin, or maybe there's too much margin. So just make sure that you stay within the objective ground, as long as you get the objective points right, and the subjective points don't matter too much. So keep that in mind. Right, so this is the first example that we've basically gone over. We can take a look at a few other examples. Alright, so taking a look at our code, we have the next one, which is, let's check out alignment. Alright, so what's the thing that you want to focus on with alignment? Well, if you have a t-shirt that's unironed or a shirt that's unironed, it will look jagged and it won't look very nice. So that's what alignment is. It's the same thing. I don't know if the analogy makes sense, but it's basically the same thing. Alright, so if we actually take a look at our page here, alright, let's actually take a look. Let me just remove this. Okay, so if we take a look at it, as you can see here, the main problem that we have is alignment. It looks a little funky. It doesn't look that decent. It looks a bit weird. Why does it do that? Well, it's doing that because firstly you have some text that's centered, and then you have a little bit of text under that is put on the left, and then you have a right indent on the paragraph, and then this other paragraph has a left indent. It really doesn't look that great, and the reason it doesn't is because nothing is on the same line. So if this was all centered, it would be okay, or if it was all put on the left, it would be alright. But keeping it like this, without having uniform alignment, this is really bad and you really want to avoid this. Alright, so how can we fix this? So if we actually go back to our code here and take a look at our code, it's pretty simple to fix this one actually. So let's see what we have. Alright, so width 4 out of 5. Alright, so instead of text center, we're gonna remove we're gonna remove text center. Alright, so if we remove text center here, this should look decent. So if you actually save that without the centered text and take a look at it, as you can see, the heading goes on the left now, so that it's uniform with the H1 under it. But the problem here is that the paragraph is indented. You don't want to indent a paragraph like that unless you have a list. Then you can indent stuff. That's okay. Alright, so let's actually go back to our code here. Alright, so if we go back to our code, we want to unindent this paragraph. So to do that, we're gonna just remove this tag here. So df8. Alright, so if we remove this and save that and take a look at it, as you can see, now the headings are all on the same line, and this looks good. But you have this thing in the center here, which is throwing a wrench in everything. So yeah, that's why you want to keep alignment proper. So let's fix this too. Alright, so if we go back to our code here, alright, let me find this. Okay, so let's see here. Alright, so text3xl, let me find, yeah, at the end there. Alright, dfr, so let's remove the center part, and then here let's remove the right padding on this paragraph to make sure that everything is aligned properly and centered. So if we actually save that and go take a look at it now, as you can see, everything is centered properly and looks pretty good. So that's what you want to keep in mind when you're dealing with the alignment principle. If something doesn't quite look right or not, then the problem you have is probably alignment. If it doesn't quite look right, or it looks weird for some reason and you can't really put your finger on it, that's why it looks weird. Alright, let me just remove the center class from this one, from this paragraph here, just to make sure that everything looks perfect. And take a look at it. As you can see, it looks decent now. We're sort of violating the alignment principle. We're sort of violating not the alignment principle, the white space principle a bit with the text that we have here. Because the paragraphs here are pretty heavy, we want to add a bit of space between each line. To basically make reading it easier. But we'll not do that for now. We can just ignore that. That's one of the things that you can do. Right, so let's see what we have next up. So if I go back to the slide here just to refresh my memory. Right, so we talked about alignment. Next up we have contrast. Oh, this is a big one. New designers screw this up a lot, and I don't want you guys to do that. Alright, so if we go to our contrast example, so if we open the contrast file here, alright, let me just open this with live server. So open with, right, so if we do open with live server, right, so if we actually open this with live server and take a look at it, you can literally read nothing, even though there's text there. Like if I highlight it, as you can see, there is text there, but there's absolutely zero contrast, so you can't read the text. This is the sort of problem that you might fall into sometime. Now, to make sure that you don't happen to do this by accident, because sometimes you tend to do it by accident and you have not enough contrast, and then some people can't really read your page. To prevent yourself from doing that, make sure that you get a WCAG plugin for your browser so that you can make sure that you don't have any contrast issues. Now, if I remember right, WCAG is Web Contrast Accessibility Guidelines. Make sure that you have a AA rating on everything on your site, just to make sure that people who don't see very well can actually see it, and people who are older or people with eyesight problems can see your page. It won't be very helpful if you have the most amazing, let's say that you had the most epic product of all time. If I can't read what's on your page, I'm not using your product. Let's just talk about that. So let's fix up this example. The blue background here isn't the really big problem. The really big problem is the text that we're using. So if we actually go to our H1 here, as you can see, alright, so font bold, alright, so tracking white. Alright, so let's actually give this a nice color. So text blue. Since we're doing blue, let's just do text blue 100. So if we actually save text blue 100 and take a look at it, as you can see the paragraph now, and it looks pretty decent. Alright, let's go back. Let's go back here. Let's just do the same thing for the rest of the site. So alright, and this here we're gonna do text blue 100. Right, so if we save this and take a look at it and take a look at the paragraph, as you can see, the paragraph looks pretty decent. Maybe it doesn't have quite enough contrast, but it's still much better than what it was before. I'm giving you like an ultra extreme example just so that you know what the contrast problem is. Usually you won't see stuff like this, but I'm giving a really extreme example just so that you kind of know what to look out for, because literally you can't see the text here. Alright, so let me just go back to our code here. Right, so if we go back to our code and take a look, let me just add the text blue 100 to everything else. Right, so here we're gonna do text blue 100. Right, and here let's do it too. Alright, so text blue 100. Alright, so if we save it to these two paragraphs here and actually go take a look at it now, as you can see, now you have a pretty decent looking blue site. It's a little bit too blue, but that's not really a big deal at the moment. But the real problem with it was contrast. It didn't contrast very well, and it looked really bad because it didn't do that. Just make sure that you don't fall into this, because usually it's not as extreme as the example I showed you. I just showed you something really extreme so that you can understand what I'm talking about here. Alright, so next up after this, we're gonna talk about colors. Now, colors can be really scary if you actually look at color contrast and color theory and all of that sort of, and all those sort of things. But the concept with colors is really simple. All you have to do is basically make sure that you don't ever do what's being done on this page. What's the problem here? Let me just remove this. The problem here is that you're using just way too many colors. That's the thing that you're basically doing. Usually you only need 2 colors and that's it. You only need 2 colors, like you need a background color, a foreground color, and then 2 accent colors, and that's it. No more. That's a decent way to think about it. Or if you like to mix a lot of colors, you can basically make sure that colors on a color wheel are quite far apart before you actually mix them together so that they contrast well and they look decent. Although, to be honest, color contrast is really complicated, so it's better just to keep it simple. Less is more here. Alright, so let's fix up this example. So if we take a look at our code, we have just way too many colors. So a simple way to fix it is to just destroy all colors. So if we actually go take a look here, if we actually just go take a look at our code, right, so screen with text for Excel, font, bold. Alright. Okay, so text 3 Excel. Alright, so how can we fix this? Okay, so taking a look, the main part of our page here, has BG orange 800. So let's change this to purple just so that it fits with the top of the site some more. So purple 900 and 800. So if we save that and take a look at it, as you can see, this fits with the rest of the site really well. Okay, so if we take another look, we take another look here and just make sure that everything looks proper. All right, so just double checking here. Yeah, everything looks pretty decent as far as I can tell. Okay. Okay, so that's the thing that you want to keep in mind with colors. Less is usually more, unless you want to try to be the professional color designer and get in trouble and a lot of headaches. I would just only use few colors and wouldn't overdo it. So yeah. Next up after colors we have a few more concepts. After that we have scale. So what's scale? Scale is basically you want to make sure that everything has a proper scale to it, so that it looks decent and doesn't completely break your site. So if we take a look at this example here and actually just open this with live server, so open with, right, so if we do open with live server, remove the old one. If we take a look at it, as you can see, the button in the middle is extremely huge. So that's the thing that you need to be worrying about here. The button that you have on this page is just ultra massive. You don't need a button this massive on your page. So that's what we are gonna fix. So if we take a look at our code here, where's the button? Alright, so the button class, it has so many classes on it. Okay, so margin top 8, rounded LG, so block so that it goes on the center, text, alright, so text 6XL. Instead of text 6XL, let's do text LG. Uppercase, that's okay. Alright, font black, font weight, that's alright. So tracking, alright, so BG wide, text orange, PX. Alright, so we're gonna change the PX here to 6 and then the PY to 4. Alright, let's see how this looks. Right, so if we actually save that and take a look at it, as you can see, the button looks decent, but the thing here is that it's a little too tall in my opinion. So let's change the 4 to a 2 here and take a look at it. And let's actually just increase the font weight. Let's increase the font size to XL. Right, so let's see how well this looks. Right, so taking a look at it now, yeah, now this button has a proper size based on the page. Make sure that everything has a proportional size so that nothing like that happens. Usually the problem that you have with scale isn't as huge, so it's a little, so there's a bit of wiggle room. Just make sure that usually being on the larger side is better than being on the smaller side. Just for accessibility's sake, so yeah, keep that in mind. It's a pretty easy principle to understand, and it's not one you need to worry about too much because usually you won't fall into this trap. Alright, so taking a look, let me just go back to my slides to see what examples we've covered and what we haven't. Alright, so we've covered scale, contrast, alignment, white space. Now we have the tough one. And it's not really tough. So basically visual hierarchy. So what's visual hierarchy? If we go to our page here and save this example and actually just open with live server, so if we do open with live server, so if we remove that and take a look at it, as you can see, white space is decent, alignment is decent, colors are okay, contrast is decent, scale is broken, but aside from that the page is decent, and it still looks like crap. Why? Well, the thing we're violating here is visual hierarchy. So what's visual hierarchy? To put it simply, there are a lot of ways to explain visual hierarchy. The book definition is it organizes the importance of things that are on the page. That's the book definition. But the really simple way to understand it, and the thing that basically helped me understand this concept because I really struggled with this when I started, is think about it this way. Where do you want your user's eye to go? In this case, we want the user's eye firstly to go to this main headline here, go on the trip of your dreams. We want the user's eye to go here first, and then after that we want it to go here, so experience something you've never done before. And then after that you want to take a look at the sign up button. Yes, yeah, that all looks decent. So how can you basically force the user's eye to go from the main headline to the sub headline to the button? That's what visual hierarchy does. You use everything else to do that with visual hierarchy. So if we go back to our code here, alright, so let's go back to our code. So if we actually take a look here, as you can see, we have the main H1. So how can we make this text here stand out more? Well, we can make it black instead of bold, so font black, so this is maximum boldness. And then we can make it uppercase. And then I'm gonna add tracking wide just to make sure that the letters don't stick together too much. Alright, so if we actually save this here, and take a look at it now. As you can see, the thing on the top here, the thing on the top here is good. Now it's capitalized, now it's standing out a bit. But the problem is the heading under it is a little bit too large and it isn't really centered. So let's actually just push it down some more, because I don't think the amount that we're pushing it down is enough, personally. So that, because we want users to focus on it, so let's push it down, I don't know, this much. Alright, so if we actually save this and try to and take a look at it now, yeah, that looks better as far as the positioning. Alright, so if we actually go back here, now we need to make this a little bit bigger. So instead of I don't know what we had, 2XL. So instead of 2XL, let's try 4XL. Alright, so if we try 4XL out and take a look at it, as you can see, now it looks big. Now it looks bigger than the sub headline. So it does the thing that we want it to do. But the problem here, now you look at it, the button isn't really standing out as much as it should stand out. So that's the thing that we need to fix next, because even though we're getting the visual hierarchy right, usually you want buttons to really pop out so that I can click them and I see them and I get excited. Right. So let's modify this button's design so that it stands out even more. Alright, so if we go to our button here, usually with buttons it's okay to go extreme. It's okay to go extreme with the other principles, because usually a lot of sites you need to click a button. Alright, so taking a look at the styles here, all the styles here look decent except one thing. We're gonna remove the we're gonna remove the border. Right, so instead of having a border, we're gonna do background color. Right, so how can we do this? Okay, so we're gonna do BG indigo 100 and then text indigo 900, font black, we're gonna make it really bold, and then uppercase, and then tracking white. So if we save this and actually take a look at it, let's actually just reopen the page here, take a look at it. As you can see, the button now looks pretty decent in my opinion, but we can make it a bit better. How can we make it a bit better? Personally, I think we could make the text inside it a little bit larger. So what's the text size that we have on it right now? I'm not sure. Alright, so let's actually just make the text larger. So text LG, text large. Let's try out text large. You want to experiment with this stuff. Just make sure that you experiment, see all the options that you have before sticking to something permanently, because usually you can find out something really cool and come up with something that's unique and different. Because as you can see, I've came up with really unique and sort of different looking sites. This isn't the normal kind of look you would see on a site. That's what you want to do. You want to use its principles, but don't allow them to basically take over your creativity and make all the sites that you make boring. That's one thing that you have to keep in mind when you're working with designers. When you're working with design, not with designers. Alright, so if we actually take a look here, I don't think text LG is enough. I think text XL would be perfect. Alright, so let's try text XL. Alright, so if we do text XL here and take a look at it, as you can see, yeah, now I think it's perfect. Alright, so we basically covered all the principles. Alright, so taking a look, let's go back to our slide here and just do a small recap so that we can top this all off. Alright, so the first thing, there's subjective and objective design. Subjective design, this depends from person to person. Objective design, this design is objectively garbage. Everyone agrees to that. When does a design become objectively garbage? When you violate one of these design principles. White space, contrast, alignment, scale, colors, and visual hierarchy. White space, thing you want to keep in mind when you're doing white space is you want to make sure that each element on your screen has breathing room. Let it breathe. And then with alignment, you want to make sure that each element on your screen has proper alignment so that all the elements basically are on the same line. And then next up you have contrast. Make sure that your elements are easy to read. Use WCAG and make sure that you get at least a AA rating. And then after that you have scale. Scale, you want to make sure that everything gets its own proportions and make sure that it looks decent on all screen sizes, because usually scale is the thing that breaks when you're doing responsive design. Next up we have colors. Minimalism is good here. Less is always more. Not necessarily, but with colors it simplifies things a lot. And then lastly, visual hierarchy. Think about where you want your user's eye to go and map the places you want your user to look, and then organize and modify the look of your page using the other principles to get the user to look at the places you want them to look to. So from the title to the blog post to the email list, for example. Alright, this has been the Design Principles series. Make sure that if you enjoyed it, that you like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next video.